I'm going to be doing the second level spells of the bards today. This is going to be a chonky video, so make sure you are comfortable and sit back and enjoy the show. The first spell we have is Aid, and it is one action, non-concentration, and lasts for 8 hours. Your spell bolsters your allies with toughness and resolve. Choose up to 3 creatures within range. Each target's hit point maximum and current hit points increases by 5 for the duration. When you upcast it, they gain an additional 5 points per level upcasted. So the things that are good about Aid is that it's non-concentration and has a very long duration. So later in the game, if we have nothing to do with a spell slot, Aid is a great spell just to throw on your team before a day of adventuring to have an extra buff. Also, it sounds a lot like temporary hit points, but it is not considered temporary hit points, so this stacks with temporary hit points. So if someone on your team is good at delivering temporary hit points, you can combine it with this to make your team as a whole quite a bit more chonky. Now, where this spell kind of falters for me, its impact is fairly low for the level you receive it at, meaning that when you are 3rd level and you get your 2nd level spells, it's not going to have the impact you need to be winning fights or to be protecting yourself from targeted damage from multiple sources. It's a good fill in the gaps spell, but it is not going to be core to our strategy, and that's where Aid falls for me. Next up is Animal Messenger. This is a ritual spell. As I talked about in the 1st level spells video, we need to focus on our fight winning spells and our excellent utility spells first, but once we have those out of the way, we can start considering rituals so we can do more and have our spell slots go further than using our spell selection. So by means of this spell, you use an animal to deliver a message. Choose a tiny beast you can see within range, such as a squirrel, a blue jay, or a bat. You specify a location which you must have visited and a recipient who matches a general description, such as a man or woman dressed in the uniform of a town guard or a red-haired dwarf wearing a pointed hat. You also speak a message of up to 25 words. The target beast travels for the duration of the spell towards the specified location, covering about 50 miles per 24 hours of flying for a flying messenger or 25 miles for other animals. When the messenger arrives, it delivers your message to the creature that you describe, replicating the sound of your voice. The messenger speaks only to a creature matching that description you gave. The messenger speaks only to a creature matching the description you gave. If the messenger doesn't reach its destination before the spell ends, the message is lost and the beast makes its way back to where you cast the spell. If you upcast this spell, the duration of the spell increases by 48 hours for each spell slot above 2nd. So this is a complete utility-based spell. You are sending a messenger over to someone to deliver a message, and you have a certain amount of range based on the time, the spell level you're casting it at, and whether or not the animal is going to be able to find it. So it is a message that has room to fail, and I have heard of some gimmicky things that people do where they put a bunch of dangerous animals as animal messengers and they time it to send them to go deliver the message, and then the spell ends, and so now there's a bunch of tigers in the room of a target is kind of the idea. It's super gimmicky and it's not where I would go, but it is kind of funny, so I figured I'd mention it. I usually wouldn't take this as a bard, mostly because we don't have the spells to spare. However, there is builds like the Piper that we have up on this channel that it's a bard focused around kind of being a little bit druidic, and I think this spell fits it perfectly. However, for most bards, this is a pass. Next up, we have Blindness / Deafness. This is one action and a range of 30 feet with a duration of 1 minute. No concentration. You can blind or deafen a foe. Choose one creature that you can see within range to make a Constitution saving throw. If it fails, the target is either blinded or deafened, your choice, for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target can make a Constitution saving throw. On a success, the spell ends. When we upcast it, you can target an additional creature. Our target is going to have multiple saving throws to break out of this, so we can't expect this to last long. On top of that, it targets the Constitution saving throw, which is notorious for being the best saving throw for monsters, so the worst one for us to target. And also, it's only targeting one creature, so we can't really call it a fight-winning spell, and this is going to be competing with our fight-winning spells. You know, it has its place, it does good things. Blindness is a strong condition. It's not going to be doing the job that it is trying to do good enough, that being a fight-winning spell. It's a pass for me. Borrowed Knowledge. You draw on knowledge from spirits of the past. Choose one skill in which you lack proficiency. For the spell's duration, you have proficiency in the chosen skill. The spell ends early if you cast it again. So here's the thing about being a bard is we have half proficiency in every skill, so we're only getting half the benefit from this spell. And the spell only targets us. On top of that, we have more limited spells than other classes. Like as a cleric, you can take Borrowed Knowledge and have a skill and go use it, and then the next day you don't have to take Borrowed Knowledge. So on a skill-based day, Borrowed Knowledge can be an excellent slot in for a cleric. But for a bard, it's just too expensive. It's a pass for me. Calm Emotions. With one action in a range of 60 feet, and it is a concentration spell that lasts up to 1 minute. You attempt to suppress strong emotions in a group of people. Each humanoid in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you choose within range must make a charisma saving throw. A creature can choose to fail this saving throw if it wishes. If a creature fails its saving throw, choose one of the following two effects. You can suppress any effect causing a target to be charmed or frightened. When this spell ends, any suppressed effect resumes, provided that its duration has not expired in the meantime. Alternatively, you can make a target indifferent about creatures of your choice that it is hostile towards. This indifference ends if the target is attacked or harmed by a spell, or if it witnesses any of its friends being harmed. When the spell ends, the creature becomes hostile again unless the DM rules otherwise. So, I actually just learned something about the spell while reading it. In previous readings, I assumed that this created an area of calm emotions, but it doesn't. It affects creatures directly in that area, which actually makes it better. Now we have two effects. We have the suppressed, charmed, or frightened for your allies for 1 minute. That's actually pretty good given the right circumstance. Or we can make hostile targets indifferent to us, and after this minute ends, they become hostile again. This is actually way better than I thought it was, and this instantly just went to one of those spells that I believe is being slept on. I have not heard this talked about enough. This is quite a versatile spell because you can target hostile creatures and you're not getting disadvantage or anything like that. So this can actually act as a pseudo area of effect suggestion, or it can kind of act as like a pseudo-hypnotic pattern. Now, the reason it's not as good as those is that it has a single line that says, this indifference ends if the target is attacked or harmed by a spell, or if it witnesses any of its friends being harmed. That, or if it witnesses any of its friends being harmed, is keeping this from being like a fight-winning spell. However, I do think Calm Emotions is good. I think it's excellent to suppress the charmed and frightened condition, which are fairly common for your allies, but it also has another use that, hey, if you see a couple of hostile people, you can make many of them non-hostile. Now, you're not going to want to get in a fight with their allies who succeeded the save, for example, because it'll just end the effect on them. But if you're retreating, for example, you can take away half of them and you keep running where half of them are indifferent, and now the ones that approach you just split their party. I also just like the flavor of Calm Emotions. I think there's a lot of characters that are wanting to solve issues without killing everything, and it's a perfect spell for them. So I think about like the Paladin of Redemption, a build I've done in the past, which if you're interested, go check it out. But that character did not want to cause any harm and wanted to solve issues by negotiating. Calm Emotions is fantastic for that situation. So I think there's a lot of characters who are going to love having that spell. Cloud of Daggers takes one action, has a range of 60 feet, and it's a concentration up to a minute. You fill the air with spinning daggers in a cube 5 feet on each side, centered on a point you choose within range. A creature takes 4d4 slashing damage when it enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there. When you upcast it, it's 2d4 for each level upcasted. Now, talking about Cloud of Daggers, it's a small area. It's just a 5-foot cube, and we need to make sure that the enemies are going in and out of it, because otherwise it's a second level spell for 4d4 damage, which is not a lot. So we need to have forced movement. When we're doing forced movement, we want big areas of effect, so we can put multiple people in it and have options. With just a tiny little area like this, one, it's not hard to escape that particular area, so they can be far enough that our forced movement can't get them in there. And two, we're only affecting one. I think Cloud of Daggers is a area of effect spell that is as bad as an area of effect spells can get. It's a pass for me. Crown of Madness. It's one action, 120 feet. 8. Concentration up to a minute. One humanoid of your choice that you can see within range must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become charmed by you for the duration. While the target is charmed in this way, a twisted crown of jagged iron appears on its head and a madness glows in its eyes. The charmed target must use its action before moving on each of its turns to make a melee attack against a creature other than itself that you mentally choose. The target can act normally on its turn if you choose no creature or if there are none within its reach. On your subsequent turns, you must use your action to maintain control over the target or the spell ends. Also, the target can make a wisdom saving throw at the end of each of its turn. On a success, the spell ends. Boy, there's a lot of points of failure for the spell, and it doesn't even do what it's set out to do. The idea is we're trying to take our enemies and have them attack their allies. Now, there are tons of problems with this. First, they have to fail a save. Then they have to start their turn with someone next to them that we had previously specified. So if that person moved, well, then they just have a normal turn. So that's a ton of point of failures already. Then at the end of their turn, they get their wisdom save, and if that target isn't near them, they can do whatever they want. So there's a dozen points of failure for this spell. It's concentration, targets one person. This is a big pass for me. Detect thoughts. One action, concentration up to 1 minute. For the duration, you can read the thoughts of certain creatures when you cast the spell, and as your action on each turn until the spell ends, you can focus your mind on any one creature that you can see within 30 feet of you. If the creature you choose has an intelligence of 3 or lower or doesn't speak any language, the creature is unaffected. You initially learn the surface thoughts of the creature, what is most on its mind in that moment. As an action, you can either shift your attention to another creature's thoughts or attempt to probe deeper into the same creature's mind. If you probe deeper, the target must make a wisdom saving throw. If it fails, you gain insight into its reasoning, if any, its emotional state, and something that looms large in its mind, such as something it worries over, loves, or hates. If it succeeds, the spell ends. Either way, the target knows that you are probing into its mind, and unless you shift your attention to another creature's thoughts, the creature can use its action on its turn to make an intelligence check contested by your intelligence check. If it succeeds, the spell ends. Questions verbally directed at the target creature naturally shape the course of its thoughts, so this spell is particularly effective as part of an interrogation. You can also use this spell to detect the presence of thinking creatures you can see. When you cast the spell or as your action during the duration, you can search for thoughts within 30 feet of you. The spell can penetrate barriers, but 2 feet of rock, 2 inches of any metal other than lead, or a thin sheet of lead blocks you. You can detect a creature with an intelligence of 3 or lower, or one that doesn't speak any language. Once you detect the presence of a creature in this way, you can read its thoughts for the rest of the duration as described above, even if you can't see it, but it still must be within range. So Detect Thoughts has a lot of uses, but its mileage is very dependent on your DM, because surface thoughts can be interpreted in many different ways. Some DMs are going to interpret their surface thoughts as they're just feedbacking what their senses are bringing them, as if they were present in the moment. So their thoughts are thinking about this person ahead of them, or the smell in the air, or, the itch that they have, where other DMs are going to actually think about what their surface thoughts would be, because a lot of people aren't present in the moment. They're thinking about something, and you would gain insight into that with no check, which would be amazing. So that variation is very heavily DM dependent, and even though the spell says that it's useful in interrogations, that's still totally up to your DM. I've seen some DMs not have Detect Thoughts be useful in interrogations without that wisdom check. And I can understand why. This can be a very broken spell if the DM is too lenient. You can gain tons of information with no check, and the enemy really doesn't have a way to contest it, and even if that's like how the spell was intended, sometimes as a DM you might want to check that. So as a DM speaking, I think Detect Thoughts is a balancing act. As a player speaking, I think it's a very versatile utility spell, and one I'm going to consider, especially if I have a DM who's lenient in the rulings. Enhance ability. One action, touch, concentration up to 1 hour. You touch a creature and bestow upon it a magical enhancement. Choose one of the following effects. The target gains the effect until the spell ends. Bear's Endurance. The target has advantage on constitution checks. It also gains 2d6 temporary hit points, which are lost when the spell ends. Bull's Strength. The target has advantage on strength checks, and their carrying capacity doubles. Cat's Grace. The target has advantage on dexterity checks. It also doesn't take damage from falling 20 feet or less if it isn't incapacitated. Eagle's Splendor. The target has advantage on charisma checks, Fox Cunning, intelligence checks, Owl's Wisdom checks. At higher level spells, you can target additional creatures. I love this spell. This is a fantastic top tier utility second level spell for me. It is so versatile for so many situations, and speaking as someone who has played a rogue face before, I really relied on my druid and my bard giving me this spell to go through some really crazy intense charisma check situations. So yeah, it's on my list. Enlarge/reduce. It's one action, range of 30 feet, concentration up to 1 minute. You cause a creature or an object you can see within range to grow larger or smaller for the duration. Choose either a creature or an object that is neither worn nor carried. If the target is unwilling, it can make a Constitution saving throw. On a success, the spell has no effect. If the target is a creature, everything it is wearing, carrying changes size with it. Any item dropped by an affected creature returns to its normal size at once. Enlarge. The target size doubles in all dimensions and its weight is multiplied by 8. This growth increases its size by 1 category from medium to large, for example. If there isn't enough room for the target to double its size, the creature or object attains the maximum possible size in the space available. Until the spell ends, the target also has advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. The target's weapons also grow to match its size. While these weapons are enlarged, the target's attack with them deal an extra 1d4 damage. Reduce. The target size is halved in all dimensions, and its weight is reduced to 1/8 of normal. This reduction decreases its size by 1 category from medium to small, for example. Until the spell ends, the target also has disadvantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. The target's weapons also shrink to match its new size. While these weapons are reduced, the target's attacks with them deal 1d4 less damage. This can't reduce the damage below 1. So enlarge/reduce is a buff/debuff, and it's very dependent on your environment. And there's going to be times when reduce is good and enlarge is bad, and there's going to be times when enlarge is good and reduce is bad. I think this spell has a lot of room for creative uses. Like I said, enlarging a goblin in its own cave to compress it and make it hard for it to move, and to keep the goblins behind it from moving past it. That's a really cool use case, and I love it. However, if we're talking just like raw mechanics here, it's hard to say this is a fight-winning spell, or it's going to be doing what we want it to do. So it's going to naturally fall into utility. The 1d4 and advantage on strength checks are good, not fight-winning. And I think I've made this clear, but I will go over it one more time right now, that I'm starting with fight-winning spells. Those are the most important, then utility, then our rituals to fill in the gaps. So this one falls into the utility and a consideration of utility. Sometimes I'm going to say this is a take for my utility, or a consideration, or a pass. This is a consideration for utility for me. Next up is Enthrall. One action, 60 feet, duration 1 minute, no concentration. You weave a distracting string of words, causing creatures of your choice that you can see within range that you can hear you to make a wisdom saving throw. Any creature that can't be charmed succeeds on the saving throw automatically, and if you or your companions are fighting a creature, it has advantage on the save. On a failed save, the target has disadvantage on wisdom perception checks made to perceive any creature other than you until the spell ends, or until a target can no longer hear you. The spell ends if you are incapacitated or can no longer speak. So it's the distracting spell. You know, the bards are often used as the distraction. You're playing music or you're just talking nonsense to the guards. You're distracting them so your party can go do things. I really love the flavor, but its expense, being one of our spell slots, or one of our spell selections, is just too high for its very narrow use case. Bards need to be versatile. Warlocks could take this and have it be a spell that they barely ever use, but they only have a couple spell slots a day. They're not going to be using all their spells anyways. So it doesn't quite work for me. It's a pass, but I will say I do love its flavor. You know, if this was on one of my bard spell list, or if this was given by a DM, I would love to use it. And speaking as a DM to DMs who have bards, consider giving them this spell for free. Next up is Gift of Gab. It takes 1 reaction, which you take when you speak to another creature. It is instantaneous. When you cast the spell, you skillfully reshape the memories of listeners in your immediate area so that each creature of your choice within 5 feet of you forgets everything you said within the last 6 seconds. Those creatures then remember that you actually said the words you speak as the verbal component of the spell. So it's a Uno reverse card, undo of the last thing you said. Again, I love this spell, but it's just not versatile enough for our spell list. This is another spell, as a DM, consider giving to your bard for free, because it's awesome flavor, not versatile enough. Next up is Heat Metal. 1 action, 60 feet, concentration up to 1 minute. Choose a manufactured metal object, such as a metal weapon or a suit of heavy or medium metal armor, that you can see within range. You cause the object to glow red hot. Any creature in physical contact with the object takes 2d8 fire damage when you cast the spell. Till the spell ends, you can use a bonus action on each of your subsequent turns to cause this damage again. If a creature is holding or wearing the object and takes the damage from it, the creature must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or drop the object if it can. If it doesn't drop the object, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the start of your next turn. Okay, so in the situation you're facing an enemy who has metal armor, for example, they are automatically taking 2d8 fire damage as a bonus action. They automatically have disadvantage on all their attacks, and you still have your actions to be doing whatever you want with them. That's very, very good, but it falls into the realm of situational, because what if you're fighting a zombie who has no metal armor? And that's the thing, is we're going to be fighting people with no metal more often. And if we're fighting with someone who's just holding metal, for example, all we can do is really convince them to drop it. Most people aren't going to have metal armor. Heat metal's fantastic when they do, but it's just too situational for me. So if I have an open spell slot, I will consider it, but it's very likely I'm going to deem it too unversatile or too specific for me to put on my bard spell list. Hold person. 1 action, 60 feet, concentration to 1 minute. Choose a humanoid that you can see within range. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be paralyzed for the duration. At the end of each of its turn, the target can make another wisdom saving throw. On a success, the spell ends on the target. At higher levels, it can split and hit multiple people. Okay, so the paralyzed condition is a powerful condition, and it's good enough that this spell is somewhat viable. Because usually when you're looking at a single target spell that they have multiple saves on, you're not loving it. But the paralyzed condition is so strong that hold person can be very powerful, especially if you can set up ways for them to fail their saving throw, and we have access to silvery barbs from our first level. So if we, this is a good offensive spell. Would I call it a fight winning spell? That's tough. We want our fight winning spells to hit more people and be more consistent, but there are going to be times when this just wins you a boss fight. So this one's kind of I put it into fight winning spell, and I put it into a consideration of fight winning spells, not like an auto take, but it's a consideration for our fight winning spells. Invisibility, concentration up to 1 hour, 1 action. A creature you touch becomes invisible until the spell ends. Anything the target is wearing or carrying is invisible as long as it is on the target's person. The spell ends for a target that attacks or casts a spell. When we upcast it, it hits multiple creatures. Okay, so invisibility is the exact amount of versatility I'm looking for in a bard, because I can use it out of combat to make me invisible. I can use it out of combat to make an ally invisible. I can make the NPC invisible that we're trying to protect. Lasts for an hour, so he's protected for an hour now. In combat, it can act as a defensive spell that helps us escape Bard's worst nightmare, which is when they are being surrounded and targeted. Bards are so bad at defense this early in the game. This is such a godsend. This is a life-saving spell. Now, the problem is it takes concentration, so it's going to compete with our fight-winning spells, which we really want our fight-winning spells to be active. That's our job as a spellcaster, as a full caster, and it really can't be with invisibility. However, that's its only downside. Invisibility is very much high as a must take for utility. Next up is Kinetic Jaunt. 1 bonus action, concentration up to 1 minute. You magically empower your movement with dance-like steps, giving you yourself the following benefits for the duration. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You don't provoke opportunity attacks. You can move through the space of another creature and it doesn't count as difficult terrain. If you end your turn in another creature's space, you are shunted in the last unoccupied space you occupied, and you take 1d8 force damage. So this does what invisibility does, but worse. The only benefit is it's a bonus action, so you can still do an action and then retreat, but it lacks the versatility that invisibility gives, and they both act as your disengage tool. So because invisibility is so much stronger, Kinetic Jaunt is a pass. Knock. 1 action, instantaneous. Choose an object that you can see within range. The object can be a door, box, a chest, a set of manacles, a padlock, or another object that contains a mundane or magical means that prevents access. A target that is held shut by a mundane lock or that is stuck or barred becomes unlocked, unstuck, or unbarred. If the object has multiple locks, only one of them is unlocked. If you choose a target that is held shut with arcane lock, the spell is suppressed for 10 minutes, during which time the target can be opened and shut normally. When you cast the spell, a loud knock audible from as far as 300 feet and emanates from the target object. Okay, knock is definitely in utility, and it falls under very situational utility, which again, we're looking for something else as a bard. I might consider it if I have spell slots to spare, which is unlikely, so it's probably going to be a pass for me. Lesser Restoration, 1 action. You touch a creature and can end either 1 disease or 1 condition afflicting it. The condition can be blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned. Someone needs Lesser Restoration. It's a utility that is very good. If you have allies who have it, probably pass. If you don't, probably take it. Locate animals or plants. Describe or name a specific kind of beast or plant. Concentration on the voice of nature in your surroundings. You learn the direction and distance to the closest creature or plant of that kind within 5 miles if any are present. 2 situational, it's a pass. Locate object. Describe or name an object that is familiar to you. You sense the direction to the object's location as long as that object is within 1,000 feet of you. If the object is in motion, you know the direction of its movement. The spell can locate a specific object known to you as long as you have seen it up close. within 30 feet at least once. Alternatively, the spell can locate the nearest object of a particular kind, such as a certain kind of apparel, jewelry, furniture, tool, or weapon. This spell can't locate an object if any thickness of lead, even a thin sheet, blocks a direct path between you and the object. Its concentration up to 10 minutes. This spell is super slept on. Locate object is very, very good. Now, we look at locate creature. That's a 4th level spell that does the same thing, except you specify a creature instead of an object. But more often than not, that creature has an object on them, and so you can do the same effect as a 4th level spell for a 2nd level spell for all intents and purposes. This isn't going to come up often, so it is situational, but it's very, very powerful, situationally speaking, and it's one I would definitely consider on my utility slots. Next up is Magic Mouth. It's a ritual. It's 1 minute, and it lasts until it's dispelled. You implant a message within an object in range, a message that is uttered when a trigger condition is met. Choose an object that you can see and that isn't being worn or carried by another creature. Then speak this message, which must be 25 words or less, though it can be delivered over as long as 10 minutes. Finally, determine the circumstance that will trigger the spell to deliver your message. When that circumstance occurs, a magical mouth appears on the object and recites the message in your voice and at the same volume you spoke it. If the object you chose has a mouth or something that looks like a mouth, for example the mouth of a statue, the magical mouth appears there so that the words appear to come from the object's mouth. When you cast this spell, you can have the spell end after it delivers its message, or it can remain and repeat its message whenever the trigger occurs. The triggering circumstance can be as general or as detailed as you like, though it must be based on visual or audible conditions that occur within 30 feet of the object. For example, you can instruct the mouth to speak when any creature moves within 30 feet of the object, or when a silver bell rings within 30 feet of it. This is a fun DM spell. I love the idea of a shop that when the owner isn't there, there's like a magical statue that talks to you and it's like, hey, we're closed, come back at these times, you know. I like that type of thing. This isn't a player spell. For most purposes, it's a pass. Mirror Image. It's 1 action, no concentration. 3 illusory duplicates of yourself appear in your space. Until the spell ends, the duplicates move with you and mimic your actions, shifting position so it's impossible to track which image is real. You can use your action to dismiss the illusionary duplicates. Each time a creature targets you with an attack during the spell's duration, roll a d20 to determine whether the attack instead targets one of your duplicates. If you have 3 duplicates, you must roll a 6 or higher to change the attack's target to a duplicate. With 2 duplicates, you must roll an 8 or higher. With 1, you must roll an 11 or higher. A duplicate's AC equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier. If an attack hits a duplicate, the duplicate is destroyed. A duplicate can be destroyed only by an attack that hits it. It ignores all other damage and effects. The spell ends when all 3 duplicates are destroyed. A creature is unaffected by the spell if it can't see, if it relies on senses other than sight, such as blind sight, or if it can perceive illusions as false, as with true sight. Boy, is this needed on the Bard spell list. This gives us a defensive option that's not taking our concentration. So this is our defensive option that can combine with our fight-winning spells. This is crucial for any Bard. This is seriously super important to take. It's a must-have. As I talked about in the 1st level spells, we don't have defensive options up to this point. Like, none. We are sitting ducks. We have such low defenses. If a DM puts any amount of pressure on your Bard, it's dropping until we get this spell. This really is a huge deal. Next up is Nathair's Mischief. 1 action, 60 feet, concentration up to 1 minute. You fill a 20-foot cube you can see within range with Fey and Draconic magic. Roll on the Mischievous Surge table to determine the magical effect produced, and roll again at the start of each of your turns until the spell ends. You can move the cube up to 10 feet before you roll. So we roll a d4. Number 1 is the smell of apple pie fills the air, and each creature in the cube must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become charmed by you until the start of your next turn. Number 2 is bouquets of flower appear all around, and each creature in the cube must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or be blinded until the start of your next turn as the flowers spray water in their faces. Number 3, each creature in the cube must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or begin giggling until the start of your next turn. A giggling creature is incapacitated and uses all of its movement to move in a random direction. Number 4, drops of molasses appear and hover in the cube, turning it into difficult terrain until the start of your next turn. Okay, so we have 2 very powerful conditions here. 1 okay condition and 1 okay condition. This is good. This is actually surprisingly good. Another spell that's been regularly slept on for its cost. There is a 50% chance that you are either blinding them or incapacitating them, which is devastating. On the circumstances it doesn't work out in your favor, it might charm them. And if they're charmed, they're not attacking you, which is good. They might attack your allies, but they're not attacking you, which is a big deal for bards. And finally, if it turns it into difficult terrain, it might do something, but that's not going to be the biggest deal. We can also move this cube when we're about to use its effect at the start of each of our turns. And this doesn't take an action, it just kind of does it. So we get to kind of continue our fight winning spell while still using our actions to do other things. This is a good spell. One I'm not going to say is a must-take fight winning spell, but it's a fantastic spell. Next up is Phantasmal Force. Concentration up to 1 minute, 60 feet. You craft an illusion that takes root in the mind of a creature that you can see within range. The target must make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, you create a phantasmal object, creature, or other visible phenomenon of your choice that is no larger than 10-foot cube, and is perceivable only by the target for the duration. This spell has no effect on undead or constructs. The phantasm includes sound, temperature, and other stimuli, also evident only to the creature. The target can use its action to examine the phantasm with an intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC. If the check succeeds, the target realizes that the phantasm is an illusion and the spell ends. While a target is affected by the spell, the target treats the phantasm as if it were real. The target rationalizes any illogical outcomes from interacting with the phantasm. For example, a target attempting to walk across a phantasmal bridge that spans a chasm falls once it steps onto the bridge, and if the target survives the fall, it still believes that the bridge exists and comes up with some sort of other explanation for its fall. It was pushed, it slipped, or a strong wind might have knocked it off. An affected target is so convinced of the phantasm's reality that it can even take damage from the illusion. A phantasm created to appear as a creature can attack the target. Similarly, a phantasm created to appear as fire, a pool of acid, or lava can burn the target. Each round on your turn, the phantasm can deal 1d6 psychic damage to the target if it is in the phantasm's area or within 5 feet of the phantasm, provided that the illusion is of a creature or hazard that could logically deal damage, such as by attacking, the target perceives the damage as the type appropriate to the illusion. Man, I love this spell, and it has such potential, depending on your DM, to be crazy good. Because they perceive it as real no matter what, you can put them in a box with nails all around the inside, and so if they approach it, it hurts. And so they feel like you just created a box with nails surrounding them and now they can't escape. So with an illusion, you're able to do a bit of damage, but you're able to completely restrain someone, and they have to use their action to do intelligence checks, which are, creatures are not going to be great at intelligence checks. They might be there for a while. As a DM though, I look at that and go, man, you can do some really broken stuff with this, and so it needs to be checked. So for example, from the text you could say that you could very logically restrain them, keep them from moving and do damage, and that's really powerful, but I might put that in check where they might have to choose, either stop their movement or do damage. Probably not both, but it's completely up to your DM. But as written, this spell can restrain people, can keep them from moving, can create walls, can do damage. It's very versatile and powerful. So because of that variance, I'm going to put it in kind of the same realm as Hold Person, that this is a fight winning spell, or it's a very powerful in combat spell, but I will put it in the realm of it's a maybe because of its variance. But I will say that I think this is better than Hold Person, which is probably a contentious opinion, but I think there's good grounding that it's far more consistent and is far more sticky. The enemies are going to have a lot harder time getting out of this than they are Hold Person. Next up is Pyrotechnics. 1 action, 60 feet. Choose an area of flame that you can see and that can fit within a 5-foot cube within range. You can extinguish the fire in that area and you create either fireworks or smoke. Fireworks. The target explodes with a dazzling display of colors. Each creature within 10 feet of the target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become blinded until the end of your next turn. Smoke. Thick black smoke spreads out from the target in a 20-foot radius, moving around corners. The area of the smoke is heavily obscured. The smoke persists for 1 minute or until a strong wind disperses it. This is a weird spell. So we basically need fire, and there's going to be a lot of times where we don't have it. And then once you do have it, it has these two, kind of like a fog cloud effect, and then kind of like a little bit of an area of effect, blindness, but only lasts for 1 turn. It's a pass for me. I think it's too complicated to do too little. Seeing Invisibility, it's your anti-invisibility. It's a situational spell. I put it on the maybe for your utility. If your party's struggling with it, if your DM's throwing a lot of invisible creatures at you, then I would consider it. Shatter. One action, 60 feet, a sudden loud ringing noise, painfully intense, erupts from a point of your choice within range. Each creature in a 10-foot radius sphere centered on that point must make a Constitution saving throw. A creature takes 3d8 thunder damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. A creature made of inorganic material such as stone, crystal, or metal has disadvantage on that saving throw. A non-magical object that isn't being worn or carried also takes the damage if it is in the spell's area. At higher levels, increases by 1d8 damage. Okay, so bards continue the theme of having only a few damage spells on their spell list, and they're not great. I really don't look at this as our job at all. We are focused on control. I would much rather be casting that Mischief spell that has a 50% chance to mess up their day than I am Shatter, so this is a pass for me. We are not blasters. Okay, next up is Silence. It's a ritual spell. It's concentration up to 10 minutes. For the duration, no sound can be created within or pass through a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you choose within range. Any creature or object entirely inside the sphere is immune to thunder damage, and creatures are deafened while entirely inside it. Casting a spell that includes a verbal component is impossible there. If you have allies, or if you yourself have maybe taken your expertise in grappling, there is potential to have this absolutely ruin spellcaster's days. It can also be used for infiltration. It's ritual. There are times when we are setting up an infiltration. We're going to break a window, for example, and setting this up can be fantastic. So I do put it in the versatile utility, which I do think it makes it better, but I'm not going to say it's a must take. This is a maybe take in the utility section. Skywrite. It's a ritual, one action, concentration up to 1 day. You cause up to 10 words to form in part of the sky you can see. The words appear to be made of clouds and remain in place for the spell's duration. The words dissipate when the spell ends. A strong wind can disperse the clouds and end the spell early. I actually really like Skywrite. A lot of people say it's worthless, but I think it's fantastic. It's ritual, but you can advertise with it. You can contact your party with it. You can do so many memes with it. It's a really fun spell. Definitely not a necessary take. It is in the ritual section, so after we have our utility, after we have our fight winning spells, we're casting too many spells to fit our spells selected. We might as well take a ritual. This is one I'd consider mostly for the funsies. Next up is Suggestion. One action, 30 feet, concentration up to 8 hours. You suggest a course of activity limited to a sentence or two, and magically influence a creature you can see within range that can hear and understand you. Creatures that can't be charmed are immune to this effect. The suggestion must be worded in such a manner as to make the course of action sound reasonable, asking the creature to stab itself, throw itself onto a spear, immolate itself, or do some other obviously harmful act ends the spell. The target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it pursues the course of action you describe to the best of its ability. The suggested course of action can continue for the entire duration. If the suggested activity can be completed in a shorter time, the spell ends when the subject finishes what it was asked to do. You can also specify conditions that will trigger a special activity during the duration. For example, you might suggest that a knight give her warhorse to the first beggar she meets. The condition isn't met before the spell expires, the activity isn't performed. If you or any of your companions damage the target, the spell ends. Okay, Suggestion. What a spell. Versatile. It can be used fantastically in or out of combat. So it takes what Phantasmal Force and Hold Person were trying to do, and it does it better. It's a save or suck spell, and it's very powerful. And it does have its restriction that it can only target someone who understands you. So there's going to be a lot of creatures you can't target this on, but like Hold Person has the same issue. So yeah, this is super powerful. If I was being optimal, this is probably a must take. Sometimes just wins fights. Sometimes it gets you through social situations. Next up is Warding Wind. One action, concentration up to 10 minutes. A strong wind 20 miles per hour blows around you in a 10-foot radius and moves with you, remaining centered on you. The wind lasts for the spell's duration. The wind has the following effects. It deafens you and other creatures in the area. It extinguishes unprotected flames in an area that is torch-sized or smaller. The area is difficult terrain for creatures other than you. The attack rolls of ranged weapons have disadvantage if they pass in or out of the wind. It hedges out vapor, gas, and fog that can be dispersed by strong wind. So very situational. Concentration. I can see use cases for it, but they're just going to come up so rarely that I think it's pass. Finally, we have Zone of Truth. It's one action, lasts for 10 minutes. You create a magical zone that guards against deception in a 15-foot radius sphere centered on a point of your choice within range. Until the spell ends, a creature that enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there must make a charisma saving throw. On a failed save, a creature can't speak a deliberate lie while in the radius. You know whether each creature succeeds or fails on its saving throw. An affected creature is aware of the spell and can thus avoid answering questions to which it would normally respond with a lie. Such creatures can be evasive in its answers as long as it remains within the boundaries of the truth. So my feeling on Zone of Truth is that it doesn't do what it sets out to do. I've kind of talked about this beforehand, but they can just not answer, which is, you know, they can just get quiet. They can just walk out of it. There's a lot of things they can do that just makes it kind of negligible. In my experience, whenever I've tried to use this, I didn't get the effects I wanted. However, I'm sure that it varies by DM, that some DMs you're going to be able to get information out of the people that you're trying to, and in that case, it would be a utility spell that's a maybe take. Okay, so that is the Bard's second level spell list. Let's overview it. There is not a ton of powerhouse fight-winning spells that came from our second level spells. I think Fairy Fire competes with our fight-winning spells here. We have the Mischief spell, I forget what its opening name is, but the Mischief spell, that's a fight-winning spell. Then we have single target fight-winning spells, such as Suggestion, Phantasmal Force, and Hold Person. We're probably going to want to take something in that area. But where the second level list really shines is from Invisibility and our Mirror Image. We have defensive options. To me, that's what second level really represents for Bards, is we finally get our defensive options online. I really feel like those are the must-take for second level spells. We also find a lot of utility in our second level spells. To me, the standout is the Enhanceability spell. That spell is super slept on and very fantastic. The surprise for me going through this was learning about Calm Emotions and how Calm Emotions is better than I thought it was. So I need to play around more with Calm Emotions, and it just went up a rank in my mind. But this was a chonky video, so thank you for taking the time to watch it. If you have any differing opinions than me, or if you have anything you'd like to share, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. We are D&D Daily. We release new D&D content every freaking day. So if you love D&D, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out.